Value Proposition, prepared for and presented at the 2018 Square One Entrepreneurship Training Program. Square One is a program of the Center for Emerging Technologies. CET is an affiliate of the Cortex Innovation Community. Square One is funded in part by the Missouri Technology Corporation.
I didn't realize that the previous talks were loaded, so if any of you watched the one I did 2 years ago, this is going to be a slightly updated version of the same content. So I hope you guys are coming in cold so that all my jokes land and it feels fresh. Value proposition. Let me try the clicker. Yay. There are lots of different definitions out there in marketing, branding, land. And so for those of you who've taken marketing classes or worked in advertising, marketing, sales, and have a different sense of what these terms mean from your previous work, you're right. there's a lot of sort of flow and swag in what different people call different things, which is why I like to start with a little bit of let's define our terms. I like these definitions, they work for me. Often you'll hear positioning and value proposition used interchangeably. And I actually don't have a strong quarrel with that, but I like this definition. A value proposition is a positioning statement that explains what benefit you provide for who and how you do it uniquely well. It describes your target buyer, the problem you solve, and why you're distinctly better than the alternatives. So buried within there are concepts like differentiation, your target audience, which Christy talked about, and what you do. Positioning, just to be a little bit specific about that. Positioning refers to what the audience thinks about your brand versus the competition. It's a concept that goes back to the early 80s, and it literally is about thinking. It's about what people have thought, how they're framing you in their mental models. So if people think that you're a spice and you think you're a mineral, well, guess what? To the world, you're a spice, because they've positioned you in their mind as a spice, not a mineral. And this is true for any number of different things. So it's how people think about you. And when you talk about doing it as a marketing activity, you're talking about activities and efforts that you take to try to change the way people think about you so that they start to anchor your business, your brand, your idea, your solution, whatever you want to call it, in a different way so that you can compete more effectively against competitors in the marketplace. When you write a value proposition, it's a strategic exercise. It's a document, and in big companies, people will spend months writing these things, and everybody will go crazy over the words, and they'll be published and then revisited in 3 years where somebody else tears it apart. For early stage companies like yourselves, I think of these as really important exercises to go through, but also don't get too locked into it. Like it should be more like a goal setting exercise where if you draft it, check in with it once a quarter or run it by your advisors. Or if you have a board or a mentor and say, hey, here's where I am on it right now, but as I'm growing or as I'm seeking funding or as I'm exploring this audience, the audience I thought I had isn't working. Or the benefit that I thought we had, people are telling me my benefit is slightly different, and what does that mean for my business and how it's organized? I think you need to give yourselves permission to be somewhat flexible with these things, but not so flexible that you aren't strategic. If you're making major changes, make sure you're making them purposefully, not just because, well, that didn't work, let me try this. And also, as we go through this, I'm breaking it down into steps, but when you draft it and work with it, it should work as a cohesive whole. It helps you focus so you can influence how people think about your brand. And I think that's true. So it's one of those things where you can either use these as thinking tools and just have it in your head, or you can write it down. I think it's helpful to write them down. But if you're one of these people who's more like, I can write a sonnet and just sort of have it in my head, go with God. The classic form. And this is one of those things that they teach in advertising and marketing classes. And it's sort of time tested as a form of writing, kind of like if you think about a 5-paragraph essay or a haiku. It's a form of writing a strategic statement. That said, if you can write it in an essay form, if you can write it in a poem, and it does all of these things, then you still probably have a pretty solid value proposition. So don't get scared by classic rules. I want to sort of share best practices, but give you guys sort of the freedom to be creative and not intimidated by things you may not be familiar with. If this seems like a lie as far as whoa, think about the fact that we're going to break it down into these component pieces, and if you focus on each component and get them tight and put them back together in this format, and it still makes sense, then you've made yourself a positioning statement. So the classic form is for a target audience, and a target audience can be something demographic, like it can be kids 12 to 15. It can be something emotional. It can be for progressives, you know, like in politics. It's like, well, that's a set of beliefs and aspirations. So the target audience is a group of people that you're going to target. And if you say everybody, you are setting yourself up to not do very, very well unless you're selling water, you know, something that literally everybody needs and wants. And actually there's a huge category out there with different versions of water. I see 3 brands of water and a bunch of Coca-Cola in here. Brand X, which is your company or your brand, is the category or your competitive frame. So your category could be automobile, or your competitive frame could be the full service HVAC company. Whatever you think of as the business you're in and where you compete. And the more precise you can be about that, the better as well. Don't get so narrow that it's you and one other company, but don't be so big that it's like you against the world. That, however you do differently and uniquely well, and how you do it, reasons to believe, and things that prove it true. So if you're the, well, let's just pick one like BMW. For automotive driving enthusiasts, BMW is the ultimate driving machine, you know, and they sort of created that, you know, automobile, or no, they're the automobile that is the ultimate driving machine by da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, handle, 0 to 60, all of those different features and benefits. And I probably just butchered their value proposition, but hopefully that gives you a sense of how these things are structured and how they sort of go from target audience to the category down to how you're different to then why should I actually believe that. And when it comes to reasons to believe, those are things you should also be really, really tough on. If it's fluff and fuzzy and kind of BS-y, then it's probably going to not bear the test of its tires getting kicked in the marketplace. You may make some sales, but it won't hold up. I mean, you want to have some real meat there. And if you're in a service business, I'm sure some of you are in service businesses, or if you're in technology, I know that those things can easily get fuzzy, particularly if it's a technology that's not built yet. I'm looking at Quentin in the back. And we're on the board of an information app-driven thing, and when it wasn't made yet, and so a lot of what it'll do, you're like, well, we think it's going to do this, we think it's going to do that, but even if you haven't made it yet, be specific with, we're going to make it do this, that, and the other thing. If you can't deliver ultimately, then you're going to go in there and tweak it, but you want to have something there that says it's going to be real, and this is what we're going to bring to market. Any questions so far before I start getting into razzmatazz? These are sort of our definitions and terms and concepts phase of the presentation. Yes?
Could you give examples of what you mean by reasons to believe?
Any particular brand you got in mind?
Well, let's stick with BMW.
Okay.
Right, so if you know, the category is luxury automobiles, and the differentiator was high-tech, sports-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So then, by reasons to believe, what do you mean? Are you saying according to Motor Trend magazine?
That could be one. So a third-party endorsement could be a reason to believe. A test drive could be a reason to believe. If you say that, you know, and that was a little bit ethereal, but I think that would be one, particularly for a car like BMW, which is if you test drive it, you will feel the difference. That would be a reason to believe that this has better technology and is an ultimate driving machine. Or you know, when you get into it, it feels like a cockpit and it's got all of these different, you said it's a luxury automobile, so then I would expect I'm probably borrowing this from another brand, but the Corinthian leather, which was complete BS, but or handcrafted this, that, the other thing. So so those are reasons to believe that it's actually luxurious. The price. If a BMW costs $17,500, I'm not going to believe it's a luxury car, even though I'd like to buy it. Those are things that can ultimately make people more likely to believe that ultimate proposition. Okay. Anybody else? I would think the niche is more like your competitive frame. The differentiator is what makes you different. What makes you different? Yes.
How does this differ from the traditional mission statement?
That's a good one.
That comes in your business plan that you can talk to in high school?
I think a mission statement is about your purpose. The positioning and value proposition is about how you're different in the marketplace. So you can have a mission that's about look at all these cause-related places. If your mission is to provide employment opportunities to developmentally disabled people, but you're running that new restaurant over there by it's not Adapt, huh?
Bloom Cafe.
Thank you. If you're running the Bloom Cafe, your actual business proposition is we're a cafe and we have affordable prices and we make good hoagies, but your mission is very different than what your brand is doing. Yes.
Can you expand on the difference between the value proposition and the pitch? Which one is most important?
Pitch meaning a sales pitch, or like a
pitch? Because just last week we talked about having our pitch down to 30 seconds, 2 minutes, and now we're talking
I think they're two sides of the same coin. Meaning, if you have a really strong value proposition, that is the outline of a very strong pitch. You know what I mean? Like you'll be able to do an elevator pitch because your value prop is tight. You won't read it like a value prop. You'll probably have a little bit more flair with it, but a strong pitch is just a really good value prop, emotionally and dramatically expressed.
So it's a core, so the value proposition is kind of a core piece
Mm-hmm.
of the pitch.
Yeah. Like I would say your value proposition is your outline, your rough draft, your legal brief for the pitch. The pitch to me is more, going back to your point about theater or acting, is more salesy than, so you might put some superlatives in a pitch, like it's tremendous, to borrow a word from our president. But I don't think that you can say your differentiator is that it's tremendous. That's too fluffy. Yes.
So, since you can have multiple bullets within your value proposition, then for each of those bullets, you can have a few differentiators and then multiple reasons to believe under each one?
No, that's a great question. I think you need a core. This is about focusing. You want a core key differentiator. That doesn't mean you can't have other things you do well, but if you're BMW again, they differentiate on performance. Volvo used to be about safety. You know what I mean? It's like, is BMW an unsafe car? No. But their key differentiator is their performance and the driving experience, which means when you're driving in that thing, unlike a Lincoln Town car, you're going to feel the road. And they're saying that's a benefit. And your grandma might not think so. Does that make sense? So this is where you're going to really, really focus your difference on. And if you have a product line, you can have products that have individual positionings. So if you're Procter & Gamble, Tide might be positioned one way, Dreft for kids and babies might be positioned another. It's a different target audience. It's all soap, but this one's gentle for babies, that one's heavy duty for working families and little kids wearing Tufkins. But if you're a business, and you're doing your brand positioning, you want to say my company does this one big thing better than anybody else.
Okay, so though you can have multiple bullets in your value proposition, you want to boil it down to one bullet?
For your differentiator, yes.
Sorry?
For your differentiator, yes. So you can have multiple reasons to believe, which you might want to play around with, well, is that reason to believe really my differentiator? You know, sometimes these things are sort of, they can be flipped. Then you kind of want to play with them. Like you might want to get Post-its and say, okay, I think my differentiator is we provide really, really personalized service. And you know, the reasons to believe are, you know, not only do we have the best formulation, but we customize it to you. But if you started doing a lot of things in those reasons to believe that started to feel very technical, like, you know, we custom mix, I'm admiring your hair color, so I'm thinking, we custom mix our hair color so that it fits you and all this kind of stuff. You might be like, well, wait a minute, maybe my differentiator is more technological than service-based. So sometimes in the writing of it, you might discover that what you thought was your differentiator is in fact, you know, maybe not the strongest thing to hang your hat on as a differentiator. Yes?
If the differentiator is not the cost is involved, so lower cost, better performance. It's not the differentiator, cost of the product.
Can cost be the differentiator?
Yeah.
Yes. I would say Walmart has cost as a differentiator. It's a tough one. You better be Walmart. It's hard to huh? Yeah, like if you're gonna say we're the low price, then you gotta be the low price. Yes.
So I understand that products can have multiple different value propositions if you have a product line. How do you create a value proposition for the company if your products aren't also, you know, if they're not similar?
Give me an example.
So company Clutch Creations first product, but we're gonna have other Clutch Creations in the future that maybe enable convenience in other ways. So is maybe convenience not a best differentiator, but how do I figure out what is the same about all my products?
Yeah, you try to figure out what runs through all your products, or what about the company that's providing the products is unique. So if have you heard of Askinosie Chocolate? They're in Springfield. And they're like a bean bar. Yeah. So we were going through there, coming back from the Ozarks on vacation, so we stopped off in their chocolate factory. And you know, Sean Askinosie's written books, and it's a neat story, and it's Missouri-based. So anyway, look him up. But they were talking about the fact that they make chocolate, but what they're about is ethically sourcing and providing a market for these small farmers in developing markets. So if what you make, and that kind of goes to the mission question that came up earlier, but what's different about Askinosie chocolate is not they pointed to a particular press that is the only one like it in the world, that only a chocolatier would know about and understand, but the real difference is how they work with cocoa bean farmers. So, but they've got white chocolate and dark chocolate and sea salt chocolate and, you know, does that help?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So along with that, are you saying that it's then okay to have one value proposition overall, or if you are one business with various products, should we make value propositions for each item or product that we sell?
I think it depends on what you're selling. Like what are you doing?
Right, so with pie, purpose and everything, our goal is to add purpose to everything by having sweatshop-free and environmentally friendly versions of everything.
Mhm.
Right now, that's
Literally everything?
That's the goal, but I don't sell everything now.
What was I saying?
So right now, that's soap, t-shirts, and water bottles.
Okay.
Which are three very different things, but like you said, the commonality is that they're all ethically sourced.
Okay.
So with that, like, is it okay to have one central value proposition, or should I be thinking about all of those things separately?
I would do one central, because to me that sounds like a company that's like, remember the old Intel Inside campaign where they marketed themselves, I mean they were chip, but they marketed themselves as an ingredient brand, meaning like look for a computer that has Intel inside. What yours sound like is a combination of a good housekeeping seal of approval and an enabling brand and a consulting brand, and you're promoting the idea space of ethically sourced and you're demonstrating it through 3 key products, but you could also be in partnership, like a pie collaboration with Adidas that's got 3 lines that aren't sweatshopped. And I'd be like, oh, I understand that if pie's associated, then it's ethically sourced, and I like Adidas, and I now feel better about these 3 pairs. Like I bought a pair of New Balance 8 years ago because they were made in America. I mean, they weren't the cutest shoes, but they were made in America, and I felt better about it. So I would, so there's that. What your company is doing is resolving that cause-related consumer tension about I want to feel good about what I buy, but I also want what I want.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah.
So I would do 1, because you can't make everything. You won't make everything, but you can have a brand that stands for the ethical making of things. Is that too esoteric? Got a little philosophical there. Anybody else? You guys are having great questions. I like coming to talk to this group because you guys make me think. All right, back to slides. First of all, identify your competitive frame. Wait a minute, before I get too far into this, how much more time do I have?
You have about 25 minutes.
Okay. We talked about this a little bit, but a key question to ask yourself is what business are you really in? And just be ruthlessly honest with yourself about that. We sort of workshopped it with a couple of you during the Q&A just now about, what business what's your name again?
Alidra.
What business is Alidra in? Is she in the manufacturing business, or is she in the idea space business about a certain point of view? So a couple of examples is Facebook in the advertising business or the entertainment business. You could argue that maybe or publishing business, but what is Facebook's, there's some congressmen that want to regulate it like a utility. When they built that thing, they never thought that they would enter a discussion about whether or not they're a utility, an advertising company. They're like, oh, we're a social network. Well, people are like, no, we're going to regulate you like NBC. Is UPS in the shipping business or the logistics business? They had a tagline for a while there that was about being in logistics, because they realized that a lot of people can move your stuff from here to there. Where their business-to-business customers were really finding benefit was the fact that they could coordinate it, similar to sergeants in the Army or people in Walmart. There are industries where moving stuff around is the key benefit. Does your company make nails or 1/4-inch holes? It's one of those old sayings about nobody, people, what you're buying is the hole. That's the ultimate thing you might want from a drill. This is a good kind of apocryphal story. I'm not even sure if it's actually true, but I like it, so I like to retell it. And this guy says it's true in this article. Ray Kroc, founder of McDonald's, once asked a group of MPA students what business he was in. And they were like, oh, you're in the hamburger business. And he's like, no, I'm in the real estate business. And so anybody who's familiar with McDonald's and their franchisee and their modeling and all that kind of stuff, they do a lot of great things. But the reason they grew and continue to exist is real estate. They buy it, they lease it, they negotiate it, they know where to put it, they study that stuff. I mean, that's the real business they're in. And once you think about that and understand it, that the burgers are secondary to what makes McDonald's successful, that makes you think about the company very differently if you're running McDonald's. Okay? Yes?
This past slide was about the actual questions. I'd like to talk about an example, because I feel like if I just read the question and don't think about it, I have some kind of conviction about the answer, but I kind of feel like I'm full of BS, and I'm just kind of like, I don't really know why that's my opinion. So like Google's maybe a good example where they're primarily an advertising business, but they're kind of bad at it. And they're like really good at IT stuff. So like in that example, like which of those is important? Which of those is supposed to be driving me to say one thing or other is their business? Does that question make sense?
Sort of, but Google realized that problem and they spun themselves up into Alphabet.
Yeah.
So remember, I mean, I think that actually is on the road to answering that question, which is Google itself realized that they had hosting services, an ad business that was based on search, and a whole bunch of other products in there, and they realized that Google is Google, and these other things are other things. So let's make Google a subsidiary of the bigger holding company for this broad range of technology. So I do think that they struggled with that. You know, like the original, our purpose is to organize the world's information. They went far afield, but you've got to give them credit for saying, let's anchor back down Google into Google land. Restate your question, because I'm not sure I answered
Well,
it.
if I could say it better, I would be less confused, I think. Yes, I guess the Google, it's like Alphabet is like a kind of IT moonshot holding company.
Yeah.
Like that's really their business. That's kind of where I took the last example. Is that reasonable? Kind of reasonable way
Yes.
to look at this?
Yes. But I think it was smart of them to not have an ad business being distracted by an IT moonshot. You know, so they let that be what it is.
It's
Yes.
the same thing with Uber, you know, when they would get in trouble, they would say, like, the driver, you know, caused a problem, they say, well, they're using software.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really considered transportation per se,
Mm-hmm.
they're more software.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like the same thing?
It was, but I think they ran into a very similar tension.
Okay,
That
and
where
they
where
ran into a problem with
which
that.
goes to the positioning thing, which is they could say that all they want, but the average person with the app were saying, no, you're just a better version of my cab, and therefore that's a transportation expectation. So when people position you as a better version of Laclede cab, you don't get to say we're just the software.
Right.
And the same thing has happened with Airbnb. Girl, you haven't heard what happened with Airbnb? Like they keep, you know, having hosts, you know, sort of discriminate and calling cops on people, and yeah, and so they've run into this tension of they are supposed to be a better version of a hotel, but a hotel can't tell me they're not going to give me my room because I'm a black woman. Somebody who's giving away their apartment, that was happening on their platform, and they had to do a whole ad campaign, and they're policing their platform because they realize that people want to tax them like hotels. They want to say they're a platform, and that's one of them tensions in the new economy type thing, where my consumer expectation would be if I rented the room or it's available, it should be available just like a Hilton. But because it's peer-to-peer, it doesn't work that way. But they realized that in order for them to grow, they had to address that, even though they are technically just the platform. They tried to be just like Uber, and they were like, nah, not going to work. Did a whole ad campaign, educating their users, et cetera.
But we are doing different type of fits.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? There is something where you have to be able to have that proposition or value proposition fit both people in a platform. It
Yes.
has to be two parts to your value proposition.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that is true. I do think a change to the rule would be if you have a strong B2B side versus a consumer side, that to think through.
They're B2B, or are they B2B?
They're both. Well, oh, Airbnb or Uber?
You do the platform.
Yeah.
Is that B2B or no?
It-
Two-sided market.
Yeah.
Not necessarily B2B because there's both consumers on both sides. It's a two-sided market.
Okay.
Yeah. But in LA, there are some apartment complexes that are 80% Airbnb units. So it's starting to become sort of pseudo B2B-ish. Ish. Anybody else got anything on that? Yes.
It sounds like all the problems that we're having with two-sided markets. So maybe if you're talking about Facebook, for instance, and you're identifying the competitive friend, are we talking about the customer who actually purchases advertising space from Facebook as being who you're framing the competition against, or the user who's using it for entertainment?
I think it's ladies' choice and or both. Like I do think it's useful probably to write for both and make sure that it makes sense as a two-sided thing, meaning, okay, we're going to have this distinct value prop for our B2B customers and these for the consumer, and are those in tension or are they complementary? As long as they can coexist and they're complementary, I think they can be very distinctly different. But I remember when I was working at an ad agency trying to call Facebook once with an actual ad agency problem, and it was I might as well have been in bedrock. They don't have telephones. They don't know how to deal with, at least 5 years ago, they didn't know how to deal with agencies that were used to dealing with radio stations or real media companies, and they didn't give a damn. They're like, well, we have go see our help page. And I'm like, we don't do that. We want reps. as a B2B customer. But at the same point, they built a whole new way of buying media, and the market shifted to them. As a consumer, I'm still uploading pictures of my dog. Happy as a clam. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Make sure there's a benefit there. And this is one of those things where you need to have people around you who will tell you the truth, and who understand your business enough if it's complicated to understand it enough to be able to tell you the truth. But, and I'm picking on spectacles because I picked on them 2 years ago, and now I just read that a couple months ago they came out with version 2, and I just thought that was hilarious that the very same brand that had just launched when I was here a couple of years ago with this $130 thing that I predicted was going to be a mass failure. It was a mass failure. Now they're out with version 2, and it costs $20 more. Where, you know, you put on these eyeglasses and you can record stuff, and it uploads it to Snapchat, and Snap is saying that they're a camera company. Other people think of them as still as a social network, but they're doubling down, if not rumors having tripling down on this wearable camera thing. And it's almost like, yeah, but I was just like, it's crazy. And I'm curious to know, I would love to just ask somebody who works there, did any consumer ever tell you that they wanted that on their glasses? And I buy the old Sony thing of people never said they wanted a Walkman. You just have to anticipate and tell them where they want to go. Same thing with iPod. But this one, unlike those devices being delightful upon unboxing, they're going to the second version of it with minor feature changes, like, oh, now we can do the static pictures, and it'll do this and the other thing. But the core, is there a there? I still question. I wish them all the success, but I do think that this in this sort of physical techno service social network space is an interesting product and brand to watch to see, is there a benefit there? Is it, I mean, and I know I'm in my 40s and I wear glasses, so to me, I'm like, wait a minute, I'd have to want to spend $800 at least on filling the lenses on the damn things. So maybe I'm not your market. They at least came out with some that weren't sunglasses, but it's still, this is the old version, but the new version isn't much cuter. Is this really something people want or need?
Glasses made that up because there's nothing worse than fingerprints on your glasses. But you intentionally put your hands that close to your glasses is really ridiculous.
Oh, this one? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, fingerprints everywhere.
Yeah, but would you intentionally put 2 cameras on each side of them?
Click in.
But technologists have been trying this since Google Glass, and so now they keep trying this. I don't know why they think we want this, but I don't know. And that's just one I'm picking on, but there's lots of things out there where you're like, that you can see future failure about to happen, and you don't want it to be you. So make sure that you aren't convincing yourself that there's a massive market for something that there may not be a market for. I'm not going to try to play this because we're running late and we were having technical difficulties with it, but Purple is a brand that I think is doing a great job of marketing a lot of real benefits. This is a very crowded new category, the direct ship mattress category. This brand in particular does a great job of articulating clear benefits. Most direct response television commercials, particularly the ones that air a little earlier in the day and they're not, it slices, it dices, it's Julienne's fries. But those are, you know, if you're gonna put together one of these 2-minute things, it usually has a lot of clearly articulated benefits. Over the course of the next week, do a little exercise and pay attention to those in particular, because they are usually very highly organized, tested benefit propositions, because that's all they're talking about. I mean, Purple, if you go to this website, it is one big benefit on steroids followed by a shopping cart. Okay? I know you're going to be talking about the Target a little bit more later, so I'm not going to belabor this one. But think hard about it. You know, who in the real world is going to use this product? Do they exist, or are you dreaming? These are some examples of products, and only one of these was a success. We got New Coat. I don't know. Anybody remember that, or is this group getting too young? All right. Okay. For those of you too young to remember, I think this was either the 80s or the 90s, they did a bunch of formulations and decided that they'd come up with a better tasting Coke, and objectively they did. People preferred the taste of it, but they failed to realize that Coke, the taste of Coke, is not just about the actual taste of Coke. It's about the cultural memories, familiarity, the nostalgia, the meaning of Coke to Americans. Coke was delighted to learn this, but they took a big hit learning it. They got beat up all over the place, had to pull this product off the market, reintroduce the classic Coke. There's some classic Cokes around, and it was an abysmal failure. Sedgway, that didn't take off, and probably because people were breaking their legs like you've done. It just didn't take off. Rocky Springs water. Coors thought it could bottle its delicious Rocky Mountain water, and people would want to drink its water. People didn't think about Coors for water. They didn't want to think about Coors for water. They damn sure didn't want to be walking around with anything that looked like Coors when they were supposed to be drinking water. Failed. Pet Rock did really, really well. That guy was rich. So when you're talking about your target audience, describe a human being and think about a real person. And there's nothing wrong. In fact, I highly endorse it. And when you start talking to your research people about this, you're going to run into these things. You want to understand your target audience in terms of demographics, psychographics, market size, penetration, usage, all that good stuff. I mean, that's what I do all the time is research that. But then when I'm writing my strategies, I also want to roll those up into human terms. So suburban women aged 35 to 55 is a way you could express your target audience. But if you told me your target audience was yoga moms, I have a much more visceral understanding of who that person is, and it lends to an elevator pitch a little bit better. It has texture to it, and you can say yoga moms who happen to be suburban women aged 35 to 55. But you start to get a social milieu and a look and an aesthetic. You even get a sense of what these people, or what kind of latte they might get. And if you can't describe your target in some of those little terms, then you haven't thought about them enough and you haven't brought them to life for yourself. And this is probably getting a little close to, some of you might have worked with personas. Those are good tools to create for your target audience. The more you describe them as real people and have that in mind, kind of like a fashion designer would have a muse, then you can really make sure that your product is appealing to those people and their mindset. Domestic beer rejectors might be a way a marketing nerd might describe their target audience in beer, but bearded craft beer snobs, I know who that guy is. And I know what he wants and what he doesn't want, and I know where he might drink. I know how often he wants to have a new brew to explain, and that makes much more sense than just they don't like Miller Lite. People with 2 plus pets per household at a 210 index, according to syndicated research. Okay, so they got a lot of pets. Dog lovers, dog lovers. We know these people. They're the people. Well, I'm one. That are looking for pet-friendly hotels and go to doggy daycare and have a holiday collar and buy their dog a birthday present. If you can talk about your audience like that, then you're starting to get to a place where you can anticipate them and really, really make sure that you're doing things that can resonate with them. Don't delude yourself when it comes to real needs and benefits, consumer needs and wants. If they haven't told you they want it, or if you haven't done research to find out they want it, there's a neat TED Hour podcast up right now on decisions, and it's got a clip from Malcolm Gladwell I've heard before, but he tells the story really, really well, and it's from one of his books about the pasta sauce market and how there are 3 types of pasta sauces that people like: plain, spicy, and chunky. And when Ragu was getting its butt kicked, Prego was getting its butt kicked by Ragu. They did some research, and the guy said, well, these are the 3 types that are out there, but nobody makes chunky pasta sauce. And they said, so 1/3 of the market doesn't have a sauce on the shelf. And they're like, yeah. They introduced Ragu with a bunch of chunks and sold gangbusters. Rarely are you going to find an unmet need like that. a complete gaping hole in the market worth a third of the business. But if you find that, great. Otherwise, you have to be the type of person or type of brand that can actually manufacture desire. Creating a need or a want, capturing people's imaginations, manufacturing that irrational desire, like Wu-Tang Clan's $2 million one-time album. That shouldn't have cost $2 million, but because they are who they are and they did this as a art thing, that Shkreli guy bought it. Or Tesla has done it. Apple's done it repeatedly. These are people who can sort of add that extra special sauce. If you're in the functional benefit land of really kind of coming up with something, like you're talking about bags of convenience and looks like phone strap. Oh, I like that idea. A real need. So if you don't have a real need that you're fixing, which is my phone's over here, and I want it right here, but I can't put it right here. Yeah, I don't have a pocket. Yes.
My mom met her the other day. My mom was her customer. I came today. She brought, but my mom was talking about this the whole time since I seen you a couple of days ago. Yeah. We went somewhere 2 days ago. My mom was with me.
Mm-hmm.
I swear to goodness. My mom the whole time said, I really need to talk to her because if I would, her phone was in the other room.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Or she'll leave it in the bathroom. But oh my God, you was in my house all weekend.
Yeah. I bought 2 fashion fanny packs for our vacation so that we would have a place to put our keys and our phone. Because then I only have 1 pair of yoga pants that has a pocket big enough for the phone. It is an unmet need out there. But if you can't find that and you can't make that, then you need to go do more work. Okay, that just wanted to be real with everybody. Be different. It's best to be first or different, and then build a strong enough brand that can withstand the constant waves up against it like a rock shaving away at its differentiation. Because you're going to have that moment of difference, and if you're first and you're different, and you can start taking the market, and then you become the brand of, what do you call these? Clutch straps. Then everybody else is following in your wake. So you want to build that brand while you're still first, but just know that every differentiator gets, if it's good, other people are going to come in and follow you, and it'll become less differentiated. And ultimately, one of the few things is going to be the brand itself. Oh, is this 5-minute warning? All right. Moving along. All progress occurs because people dare to be different. And just to sort of underline that, I'm sure everybody in this room is going to have an emotional reaction to the next slide. This came out online as just a tweet. Then it got picked up. Then it got a bunch of earned media. And for the first few days, people were putting their Nikes, on fire, and people were worried about the market cap. Within a week, they'd sold a gajillion, which is my way of saying I don't have the stat handy, but it's a big number, and their stock has reached an all-time high 5 days in a row, meaning all-time high, all-time high, all-time high, all-time high. Have they pissed off some people? Yeah, but before this, nobody was talking about Nike. They're trying to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Just Do It and get some attention, and they just zagged while everybody else is zigging. And it's paying off for them. So the daring to be different, first of all, reinforces this campaign that he was just signed. And if anybody doesn't know, this is Colin Kaepernick. But I think that the strength of the choice they made is that everybody knows who he is, everybody has an opinion on it, and football season is starting. So there's that. I do have time for this, I think. You know what, I'm going to skip this, but I'm going to tell you about it and suggest that you go out and Google it. It is a scene from Mad Men, which is a show that went off the air maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was about advertising. And for those of you who are looking for inspiration about your value props, go watch the first 2 seasons of Mad Men. It gets a little soapy after that. I didn't even watch the last season. But the first 2 seasons are a real good primer in this. And Don Draper is the best at both value propositions, positionings, and elevator pitches. So just watch him when he's not drinking, smoking, and cheating on his wife. But there was a product they were introducing called the Kodak Carousel, and it's a slide projector that goes round and round and round and round and round. Clients come in, and they're talking about features and benefits and the new technology of the wheel. And he gives them this wonderfully romantic pitch about the fact that it's about nostalgia and memories. And it's not a wheel, it's a carousel. And so Google Mad Men carousel scene and watch that and when you get a moment, because I think it's really sort of inspirational, which is why I was going to show it to you, but we've run long. When you're writing these things, use simple language. Watch for words like disrupt, pivot, we're the Uber of whatever. You know, if it sounds like BS, then it probably is. Try to write in language for fourth graders to the degree you can. I know some of you are doing some stuff that's really high tech, but the simpler your language, the more precise your strategy. Positive affirmation for you. You can do this. It just takes some time, some hard work, some editing and editing and editing. It's not that hard, particularly if you break it into its piece parts. We don't have time to try to write one, but we kind of did along the way, so I don't feel like I've short-shrifted you. We did this on the front end of the presentation. And I think we're at time.
One or two questions?
Yeah. One or two, she says? One or two? They're all out of questions. They've been talking the whole time. Where are we? Yes?
This is kind of, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, or if you feel like it's too off topic. But I'm just wondering your thoughts on intellectual property as you're like developing these types of things. Like, I don't know. Long story short, everybody keeps stealing everything I have, and I just need to and I'm just trying to figure out like what.
Are you putting it online, or how are they stealing it?
Yeah. So my products are available. So I'm already in business, and so people just keep taking everything. And so I'm just trying to figure out like what I'm supposed to do to try to stop people from making replicas of my things.
Well, the only thing that comes to mind, other than hire a lawyer, would be to embed in your product a design element that you can trademark and protect. The classic Coca-Cola bottle shape is protected. Nobody else can make that very sexy round shape, the iconic shape of the glass bottle. They own that. You wouldn't think you can own a bottle shape as a brand asset, but you can. But unless you do something distinctive like that, trademark it, and then sue people who get in your way about it, I don't know. Yeah, it's out there. Yeah.
Are you telling me you can actually stealing your motivational phrases?
Yeah, like so people take this phrases off the t-shirts, people take the names of the soaps. Like this week, I had someone post in St. Louis, so someone else here who sells soap, and it was literally named the same as my soap. And I was like,
well, have you trademarked them?
well, the soap is called Woke.
Oh, that's great.
And so now their soap is called Woke.
But you stole the word woke anyway.
I guess. But it's just like, I was just like, oh, okay, well that's exciting.
Okay, let's take Crystal.
Thank you, everybody.